There's a phrase that I think every single one of us has heard probably 1,000 times. Blood is thicker than water.
Oh, yeah. It's practically a cultural commandment.
It is. It's this script we're handed at birth that basically says, no matter how bad things get, no matter how toxic it is, family is the one thing you are never, ever supposed to break.
It's pitched as the ultimate safety net, or at least that's the narrative we're all sold. It's the foundation for, well, for almost every society, really. The family unit is the sanctuary.
The sanctuary, exactly.
Hmm.
But I was going through this mountain of sources we have for today, and we're talking about everything from psychological journals to sociological data, personal essays, and for millions of people, that whole narrative isn't just cracking.
No, it's completely shattering.
Right. That safety net feels a lot more like a trap.
It's a huge disconnect. And when you look at the data, what you see is what psychologists are now calling a silent epidemic.
A silent epidemic.
Yeah, and we're not talking about like teenage rebellion or some phase. We're talking about grown adults, people with careers, mortgages, their own kids, making this really agonizing decision to cut ties with their parents. Or you see siblings just slowly drift into total silence.
And I think that word agonizing is where we really need to start. Because from the outside, there's this huge misconception, right? If you tell someone, oh, I don't speak to my mother anymore, the immediate assumption is what?
That you're impulsive, ungrateful.
Or that you just had one big blow up at Thanksgiving and, decided to burn the whole bridge down.
Right, the Thanksgiving meltdown theory. It's this idea that estrangement is a single event, but the reality is just, it's night and day from that perception. Well, if you're on the outside looking in, you see a sudden act of what looks like rebellion. You hear a parent saying they've been abandoned out of the blue. But when we peel back the layers, which is what we're doing today, the insider's reality is almost never about a sudden burst of anger.
It's about what?
It's about survival.
Survival. I mean, that's a heavy word to use when you're talking about your mom or dad.
It is, but it's the right word. The literature shows this is a complex psychology. It's about preserving your own sanity. It's not a tantrum. It's often the last and only option left on the table to protect yourself from a total collapse.
So, okay, today we're going to do a deep dive into the anatomy of estrangement. We're going to try to debunk that myth of the sudden break.
We'll look at the specific roles people get cast in, the scapegoat, the golden child, all of those.
And we're going to talk about the why. Why do people stay for decades before they leave? And maybe most importantly, why does the body so often know it's time to go long before the brain does?
And I think it's important to set the tone here. This isn't about bashing families. It's about understanding the really profound mental health implications behind these dynamics. It's about trying to understand the truth behind the silence.
So let's jump right in. The first big concept from the research, the one that just completely dismantles that Thanksgiving meltdown idea, the sources call it the volcano effect.
This is such a perfect metaphor for it. Think about a volcano. When it erupts, it looks like this sudden, catastrophic event, right?
Yeah, 1 minute it's a mountain, the next minute it's exploding.
To any bystander, it happened all of a sudden. But if you talk to a geologist, they'll tell you that the lava, the pressure, has been building quietly, silently underground for years, maybe centuries.
And the eruption is it's just physics at that point.
Yeah.
The mountain literally can't hold it in anymore.
Exactly. And family estrangement works the same way. That final argument, the hurtful comment about a spouse, the political fight at dinner, that's not the cause.
It's just the trigger.
It's just the trigger. It's the moment that internal pressure became absolutely unbearable. But the actual estrangement began with something psychologists call erosion.
Erosion. It's such a vivid image. It's not a hammer. It's like water on a rock.
It's slow, it's quiet, and this is the key, it's invisible. This erosion takes place over decades, where on the surface, the relationship looks totally fine.
Right. You're celebrating birthdays. You're smiling in the family photos, showing up for Sunday dinner.
But underneath all of that, something is being worn down, layer by tiny layer.
And that brings us to a concept I found really, really fascinating in the reading. Microtrauma. I think we're all conditioned to look for the big bad event,
Yeah, the obvious stuff, physical abuse, something clearly criminal.
Exactly. But microtrauma is different. The way one source put it was like sediment in a river.
That's a great way to put it, because one grain of sand, one snide comment, it doesn't matter, you can just brush it off.
Yeah.
But millions of them, they clog the whole flow.
So what are some examples?
Microtraumas are those subtle criticisms disguised as concern. Are you really going to wear that? Or I'm just saying this because I love you, but you've gained some weight.
Oof. Yeah.
It's the boundary that gets pushed just a little bit further every year. It's the dismissive tone that signals to you that your feelings, your reality, don't actually matter.
It's the death by a thousand cuts. And the thing is, if you complain about any single one of them, you sound petty. You sound crazy. If you say, I'm not talking to my mom because she looked at me funny when I ordered dessert, people will think you're insane.
Precisely. And that's why it's so insidious. Individually, they're so minor, but cumulatively, they create this psychological climate that is just suffocating.
And this is where the body comes in, right?
Yeah.
The source material really highlights this. Your body starts to react before your mind even admits there's a problem.
Oh, absolutely. The body keeps the score.
I related to this so much just reading about it. The idea that you start tensing up before the phone even rings. Or that feeling in the pit of your stomach when you see their name pop up on a notification.
That's your nervous system talking to you. It's a physiological response. It knows. You might find yourself rehearsing conversations in the car before you even get to their house.
Oh, totally. Scripting every possible outcome so you don't get hurt.
You shrink yourself. You make yourself smaller to keep the peace. So what you're calling family dynamics has actually transformed into chronic anxiety. Your nervous system is constantly in a state of fight or flight, even if you're just sitting at a dinner table eating pot roast.
So when the estrangement finally happens, when that volcano finally blows, it's not because the adult child just suddenly stopped caring.
No. And this is probably the most critical reframe we need to make today. People don't leave because they stop caring. They leave because they are depleted.
Depleted.
They've run out of capacity. They've run out of energy, out of hope, out of the sheer emotional space to keep absorbing the same wounds over and over again. It's a survival response to total exhaustion. It isn't, I hate you, it's, I am empty.
Wow. That distinction it's vital. It changes the entire picture from an act of aggression to an act of collapse. You're not attacking the family, you're collapsing under the weight of it.
And very often, that weight comes from the specific job you were assigned in the family. Which brings us to the structure of the family system itself.
All right, let's dig into this. Because in a healthy family, and I think we all have an idea of what that should look like, you grow up and you discover who you are. You try things on, oh, I'm the funny one, or I'm the quiet one, or I love science.
But the sources suggest that in dysfunctional or narcissistic systems, you don't discover your identity.
You're assigned that.
You are assigned one. That is a key difference. In these systems, the family is like a stage play and the parents are the directors. You're handed a script the moment you're born. Your identity is assigned based on what the parents need, not who the child actually is.
And you're not a person, you're a function.
You're a function. And these assignments, they shape a child's entire emotional reality.
So let's walk through this cast of characters. I have a feeling a lot of listeners are going to recognize themselves or maybe their siblings in these. Let's start with the one that, on paper, sounds like the best deal. The golden child.
The golden child. Yes, on the surface, it looks like a great gig. You're the favorite. You're the one the parents brag about to the neighbors. You can do no wrong. But it's actually a kind of prison.
A prison.
Wow.
Because the love is conditional.
Completely. The golden child is essentially just an extension of the parent's ego. They are praised, they're protected, but only as long as they reflect well on the parent. Their whole purpose is to fulfill the family's narrative of success.
So they have to be the star athlete or the valedictorian or the doctor.
They're a trophy.
Wow, okay.
Exactly. And the cost of being a trophy is your authenticity. They are loved for what they achieve, not for who they are. They can never fail, they can never struggle, and they can never really have a separate identity. It's a very high-pressure, incredibly lonely existence. And if they try to step off that pedestal, they're often discarded instantly.
So then you have the necessary counterpart.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a hero in the story, there has to be a villain, the scapegoat.
The scapegoat is the designated trash can for all the family's negative emotions. If the family is unhappy, if the parents are fighting, it's somehow the scapegoat's fault. They are blamed for tensions they had nothing to do with. But here's the great irony, and the sources are very clear on this. The scapegoat is often the healthiest member of the family.
Wait, that seems so counterintuitive. The one everyone says is the problem is actually the healthy one.
Very often, yes. Because they're the truth teller.
The truth teller.
They're the one who refuses to accept the dysfunction as normal. They're the one who points out the elephant in the room. They say, hey, dad is drinking way too much, or why are we all pretending this is okay? And because the system relies on denial to survive, the truth teller has to be pushed out. They're punished for their clarity.
That makes so much sense. The system has to protect itself by expelling the threat. the threat being the truth.
Exactly. Okay, so then you have the invisible child.
What's their role?
The invisible child survives by disappearing. They learn very, very early that attention is dangerous. In these families, attention is either criticism or it's manipulation. So the invisible child just flies under the radar.
Eats quiet.
Needs very little. They grow up to be incredibly self-reliant adults, but deep down, they harbor this core belief that they don't deserve to take up space. They are unsure if they even deserve to exist loudly.
And the last one, which I just find heartbreaking, is a parentified child.
This is maybe the heaviest role of all. This is the child who gets drafted into being the emotional caretaker for their own parents.
Oh, wow.
They're the mediator during arguments. They are the therapist for their mother's anxiety or their father's anger. They learn that love is earned through service and silence. They effectively have to skip their own childhood to prop up the adults who are supposed to be taking care of them.
So you have these 4 rigid roles.
Yeah.
The star, the villain, the ghost, and the caretaker.
Yeah.
And the conflict, the thing that leads to estrangement, usually comes when you try to quit your job.
That is the flashpoint. When an adult child tries to step out of that role, say, the golden child decides they don't want to be a lawyer after all, or the parentified child says, I can't solve your marriage problems for you anymore, the system sees it as a profound threat.
And it attacks.
It resists, it blames, it punishes. The family essentially screams, get back in your box.
It's like the family's immune system attacking a virus. And the virus is just your own individuality.
Precisely. And that's often the final realization. Estrangement isn't always about leaving the people. It's about escaping the role that was breaking you. You realize, I cannot be this person for you anymore.
So we have the roles and we have the erosion. But there's another layer here that the sources describe as being, well, very quiet. It's not about what happened, the fighting, the yelling, but about what didn't happen. Emotional neglect.
And this is the hardest one for people to pinpoint, because it leaves no bruises. There are no police reports for emotional neglect. It's defined by its absence.
What does that mean, defined by its absence?
It's the comfort that wasn't offered when you were crying as a child, the protection that never came when you were scared. It's the simple curiosity about your inner world that no one ever showed.
It's the feeling of being completely alone while you're in the same room with them.
Yes. And the lesson the child learns from this is devastating. My feelings are too much, or even worse, my feelings are not worth noticing at all.
And this leads to a metaphor the deep dive sources use, which I found incredibly poignant, the empty well.
I love this metaphor. It just explains that recurring cycle of disappointment so perfectly.
Lay it out for us.
Okay, so imagine you have a bucket, and you are desperately thirsty. You go to your family at the well, hoping to draw some water. You think, maybe this time they'll listen. Maybe this time they'll actually ask how I am.
Maybe this time they'll be proud of me.
Right. And you lower the bucket down into the dark. You wait, and you just hear it hit the bottom. Clang. Dry as a bone. Just that hollow, familiar sound of disappointment. But here's the tragedy of human nature. You keep going back. You keep returning to that empty well, hoping that this time, magically, there will be water.
Why do we do that? Why do we keep lowering the bucket when we know it's empty?
Because returning to an empty well for a time feels better than admitting there's no water at all. Admitting the well is dry means you have to accept that you will never have the parents you need. And that is a grief so profound that people will do anything to avoid it.
So you keep hoping.
But eventually, keeping that hope alive becomes a form of self-abandonment. You are betraying your own reality over and over again. Estrangement is the moment you finally decide to stop thirsting for a kind of love that was never there to begin with.
You're grieving the abstract. You're grieving the childhood you were supposed to have but didn't.
And that grief takes so much longer to heal. It's easier to heal from a broken bone than it is to heal from the realization that no one ever really saw you.
This brings us to the question that I think anyone on the outside asks, and honestly even people inside the dynamic ask themselves. Why does it take so long? If it's this bad, why do people wait 30, 40, even 50 years before leaving?
That is the mystery of endurance. And the answer isn't loyalty or stupidity. It lies in two really powerful psychological forces, trauma bonding and the hope cycle.
Okay, let's break down trauma bonding. Because when I hear that phrase, my mind immediately goes to, like, hostages or cults. It sounds so extreme.
It is extreme, but the mechanism is remarkably similar. Trauma bonding happens when you have inconsistent reinforcement. In plain English, Moments of real harm are intertwined with moments of warmth.
So it's not bad all the time. That's the hook.
That's the hook. If a parent was cruel 100% of the time, it would be easy to leave. You'd figure it out by age 10. But they aren't. It's a cutting remark followed by a tearful apology. It's a week of cold silence followed by a surprisingly fun afternoon out shopping.
And your nervous system gets completely confused.
It starts to mistake this inconsistency, this chaos, for love. I was reading about the physiology of it. It's like a slot machine.
A slot machine?
It's a classic behavioral psychology experiment. If you pull the lever on a slot machine and you never win, you walk away. If you pull it and you always win, you get bored pretty fast. But if you win, sometimes, randomly, and you never know when the payout is coming,
you'll sit at that machine until you starve.
You become addicted to the possibility of the payout. You start thinking, if I just try harder, if I just stay calmer, I can earn the good version of my parent.
That's the physiological conditioning. You're chasing the good parent who shows up just often enough to keep you hooked.
And that feeds directly into the hope cycle.
The hope that this time will be different.
That hope keeps you trapped. But notice what the hope is based on. It's based on who the parent could be or who they are in those rare, fleeting moments. It's not based on who they consistently actually are.
And on top of that, you have all this societal pressure. We're taught that leaving is disloyal, that protecting yourself is selfish.
So you have the biological hook of the trauma bond, the slot machine brain, plus the societal guilt trip. It's no wonder people stay for decades. It's a prison.
So what's the turning point?
The turning point, the moment the estrangement actually happens, is when the realization finally hits. The slot machine is rigged. The cycle isn't going to change. And then this terrifying thought emerges, which is, if I stay, I will disappear.
If I stay, I'll disappear. That is chilling. It really frames the exit not as an attack, but as a rescue mission for the self.
It is. It's a rescue mission. You are saving the last little bit of you that you have left.
So let's talk about the strategy of that rescue.
Yeah.
Because the sources are really clear that no contact isn't the only move, and it's almost never the first move.
Right. It's the last resort.
It's a process.
It's a process. Distance is a dial, not a switch. You don't just flip it to 0 overnight. Again, this is all a strategy of survival, not revenge. Usually people start with what's called low contact.
Which is what it sounds like, just calling less often.
It's reducing the frequency of engagement, yes, but also the depth. You shorten the visits. You stick to safe, surface-level topics. You talk about the weather, sports, the neighbor's new fence.
It's like you're putting up a velvet rope.
That's a great way to put it. It's a way of saying, I care about you, but you don't get full access to my inner life anymore because you've proven you aren't safe with it. They can stand in the lobby, but they can't come into the VIP section of your soul.
And what if that doesn't work? If they just trample the rope?
Then you might move to something called the gray rock method.
I love this term. Gray rock. It's such a perfect visual.
It's exactly what it sounds like. You become as boring, as uninteresting, and as unreactive as a gray rock. Many dysfunctional parents thrive on drama, on reaction, on emotional chaos.
They want the fight.
They want the fight because the fight means they have your attention. The gray rock method means you stop feeding the beat.
So when they try to bait you with something like, oh, you never call me, you're such a terrible daughter, you don't defend yourself?
No. You just say, I hear you, or okay, or You give them nothing. You minimize all emotional engagement. You become neutral. You stop being a source of fuel for their fire.
That sounds incredibly difficult to do in the moment. Your whole body must be screaming to react.
It is exhausting. It requires immense self-control, and often, even that isn't enough. When boundaries are repeatedly ignored, when low contact is met with guilt trips, when gray rock is met with escalation, that's when no contact becomes the only option left.
A nuclear option.
The final tool in the toolbox. It's used to reclaim your mental health and stop the cycle for good. And choosing it triggers this massive, complicated emotional mix. It is not a victory party.
Right.
It isn't like you walk away dusting off your hands. It's grief, it's guilt. But it is also, and this is so important, it's relief.
That mix of emotions brings us to the aftermath. Because once you cut the cord, the story doesn't just end. You have to live in the quiet. And there's a specific term in the literature for the grief that follows. Ambiguous loss.
Ambiguous losses. It's a fascinating and terrible thing. It's a term coined by a therapist named Dr. Pauline Boss. And it describes the mourning process for someone who is still alive.
Which is so strange, right? Because normally, grief has rituals. There's a funeral, neighbors bring casseroles, people say, I'm so sorry for your loss.
Exactly. With estrangement, there is no funeral. There's no closure. There's just a giant question mark where clarity should be. You're grieving the relationship you never had, and you're grieving that imagined parent you always wished for.
And they're still out there.
They're out there, maybe posting photos on Facebook, maybe telling the rest of the family that you're the bad guy, but emotionally, they're dead to you. It's a very lonely kind of grief because society has no script for it. People don't know how to validate it.
And the sources specifically call out the holiday factor here. That seems to be when it's the absolute hardest.
It's unavoidable. The whole cultural narrative of family and togetherness goes into overdrive in November and December. You have Thanksgiving tables with empty seats, the quietness of Christmas morning. You're navigating this invisible grief while the rest of the world is being bombarded with commercials about coming home for the holidays.
It makes you feel like an alien.
It does. But at the same time, despite the guilt and the loneliness, there's that physical sensation you mentioned earlier. The body.
The exhale.
The exhale. That is the silver lining that keeps people going. The nervous system finally exhales. The chronic anxiety just plummets. You might feel guilty, you might feel sad, but you aren't scared anymore. You aren't walking on eggshells in your own kitchen. You aren't jumping every time the phone rings.
It's the price of freedom. You feel disloyal, but you feel safe for the first time.
And the key takeaway from the research here is this. You can mourn what you lost and still move toward the life you deserve. Those two things can exist at the same time. You can be sad and safe.
Okay, so let's pivot to the light at the end of this very long tunnel. We've talked about the breakdown. Let's talk about the rebuild, this final part. Reclaiming identity. Because this whole thing isn't just about what you leave behind. It's about what you build in that empty space.
Exactly. Estrangement isn't the end. For so many people, it's the beginning of a life that's actually fully lived. It's post-estrangement growth. Once the noise of all that dysfunction finally stops, you can hear your own voice for the first time.
You can start asking those questions that were forbidden before.
Forbidden questions like, what do I actually want? What feels safe to me? Who am I when I'm not trying to please my mother or placate my father? You start to trust that inner voice that was silenced for decades. You start essentially parenting yourself.
Parenting yourself. What does that actually look like in practice?
It means treating yourself with the gentleness and the curiosity that you didn't receive. It means validating your own feelings instead of waiting for someone else to. And it means breaking the cycle. I think that is the most heroic part of this entire process.
The decision to just say, this ends with me.
It is profoundly heroic to say, I will absorb this pain so that I do not pass it on. To refuse to pass on conditional love to the next generation, to refuse to assign roles to your own children. That decision changes the future. You are literally altering the course of your lineage.
And a big part of that is finding your people, the concept of a chosen family.
This is the liberation. This is when you redefine what family even means. You realize that family isn't just biology. You start building connections based on mutual respect, on emotional honesty. You find people who see you and value you, not because they have to, but because they want to.
It's the difference between obligation and choice.
Precisely. And we have to be able to hold two truths at once. Family can be the people who raised you, but family can also simply be the people who make you feel safe. Sometimes those are the same people, and that is a wonderful blessing. But sometimes they aren't.
And walking away isn't heartless?
It's the act of stopping yourself from walking back into a fire just because you were told that's where you belong.
Stopping the act of walking back into the fire. That is a powerful image to hold on to. It's really about choosing peace over chaos.
It is. It's about choosing to live in reality, even if that reality is painful, rather than dying in a fantasy that was never real.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's just take a moment to validate what we've covered here. We've gone from the slow erosion and the micro-traumas, through the assigned roles and the empty well, all the way to this really brave decision to step away and rebuild.
It is a journey from confusion to clarity, and I just want to validate everyone listening who sees themselves in this story. It is a quiet, complicated path that thousands and thousands of people walk. You often feel alone because people don't talk about it, because of the shame. But you are not alone. The data proves you're not alone.
And for our listener, what's the final thought? What is the one thing they should carry with them after this?
I think I want them to reconsider the definition of bravery. We usually think of bravery as, running into battle. We think of it as endurance. But in this context, bravery is the refusal to keep fighting a war that cannot be won. Choosing clarity over confusion and choosing your own healing over history is a profound act of courage. You are allowed to build a life shaped by the love you choose, not by the wounds of the past.
And that isn't selfishness.
That isn't selfishness. That is survival. And it is the foundation of a real life.
A profound act of courage. I love that. Thank you for walking us through all of this. It's a lot to process, but I think it's going to help a lot of people. And to our listeners, take care of yourselves out there.
Take care.